My mother-in-law had my husband's ex at Thanksgiving, declaring, "Relax. We're not replacing you. It's just a reminder you're not that special." My husband chuckled and stated, "If you're going to act insecure, just leave." So, I walked out and took everything with me. The smell of roasting turkey, heavy with sage and butter, clung to my cashmere sweater, the one Garrett had given me last Christmas. A cruel joke now, a soft, expensive shell of affection that had clearly meant nothing. The doorbell's insistent chime at exactly 4:47 p.m. sliced through the warmth of the kitchen, 17 minutes before dinner was supposed to start. Before I could even put down the baster, Sylvia, my mother-in-law, swept past, her voice carrying through the hall, a practiced cascade of manufactured delight she reserved only for those she genuinely valued. Then, a second voice, a woman's laugh, high and melodious, familiar in a way that coiled a knot deep in my stomach. Come in, come in. We're so glad you could make it." I walked into the foyer and the world tilted. Standing beside Sylvia, unwrapping a designer scarf from a neck that seemed impossibly long and graceful, was Ashley Morrison, Garrett's ex-girlfriend. The woman he'd dated for 3 years before me, whose framed photo had stubbornly remained on his nightstand for the first 2 months of our marriage until I'd finally, tentatively, asked him to put it away. She was exactly as her social media photos had promised, hair a cascade of perfect blonde waves, a burgundy dress that likely cost more than my monthly car payment, a bottle of wine clutched in her hand. The very vintage Garrett and I had shared on our honeymoon. Ashley's smile was bright, almost blinding and sharp. "It's been forever. You look comfortable." My throat constricted, suddenly dry. Garrett appeared behind me, his hand landing on my shoulder, a gesture that felt less like support and more like a gentle push. "Hey, Ash. Glad you could come. What's going on?" The whisper barely escaped my lips. Sylvia waved a dismissive hand, already guiding Ashley toward the living room where Raymond, Garrett's father, sat engrossed in his newspaper. "Oh, don't make such a fuss, dear. Ashley's been part of this family for years. Just because you married Garrett doesn't erase history." Garrett's breath was warm against my ear as he murmured, "Mom invited her. It's not a big deal." I spun to face him, searching his eyes for any flicker of understanding, any acknowledgement of the utter absurdity of the situation. He shrugged, already turning away, melting into the easy current flowing towards the living room. "She mentioned it yesterday. Look, Ashley doesn't have family in town. It's Thanksgiving." What was I supposed to say? A cold dread began to seep into my bones. He knew, and he let it happen. But that was only the beginning of the nightmare. The next 2 hours blurred into a suffocating tableau of forced smiles and carefully curated conversations. I served the turkey I'd spent 2 days meticulously preparing, carving slices of my own discomfort, while Ashley held court. She regaled everyone with stories of her new marketing position at some hot tech startup, and Sylvia hung on her every word, eyes sparkling, asking follow-up questions, touching Ashley's arm with a maternal affection she'd never once extended to me. "Remember when you and Garrett went to that food festival in Portland?" Sylvia cooed, refilling Ashley's wine glass. "You two always had such adventures." Ashley laughed, a lingering glance at Garrett, a look I recognized too well, a spark that had once been ours. "We did have fun, didn't we? Remember that awful hotel with the broken air conditioning?" Garrett's face broke into a genuine smile, a flash of warmth I hadn't seen directed at me in months. "And you insisted on opening the window, even though we were on the ground floor." A raccoon literally walked into our room. They both dissolved into laughter, a shared memory, a bubble of nostalgia that deliberately excluded everyone else at the table. Raymond chuckled along, but I caught his eye, a brief flicker of something that might have been sympathy. I pushed mashed potatoes around my plate, my appetite a distant memory. This wasn't just dinner with an old friend. This was a deliberate power play, a carefully orchestrated reminder that I was, at best, a temporary fixture. This whole setup was a textbook example of triangulation, where a third party is brought into a dynamic to shift focus, create distance, or assert control. Sylvia was skillfully using Ashley to create an insider versus outsider dynamic, effectively isolating me while validating Garrett's past relationship. It's a subtle but powerful form of emotional invalidation designed to chip away at a person's sense of belonging and self-worth within a relationship. After dinner, while I was loading the dishwasher, the clinking of plates a brittle soundtrack to my unease, Sylvia cornered me in the kitchen. Ashley's laughter, light and carefree, drifted in from the living room, where she and Garrett were now poring over old photo albums. "You seem tense," Sylvia observed, her tone dripping with a concern as genuine as a $3 bill. I didn't look up from the plate I was rinsing. "I'm fine. Are you sure? Because you've been rather quiet all evening." She moved closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Look, Vivian, I know this might feel uncomfortable for you, but you need to understand something. Ashley was part of Garrett's life for a significant period. She knows him in ways you're still learning. We're not replacing you. It's just a reminder that you're not the only option." The plate slipped from my hands, clattering against the porcelain sink with a hollow clang. My fingers, slick with dishwater, gripped the counter's edge, white-knuckled, as I processed her words, "not the only option." As if I were some placeholder, some temporary arrangement to be swapped out at convenience. "Excuse me." My voice, miraculously, came out steadier than I felt, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. Sylvia smiled, a tight, knowing curve of her lips, and patted my shoulder. "Oh, don't be dramatic. I'm just saying that a little competition might be good for you. Keeps you on your toes." Ashley never let herself go like this. Her eyes, sharp and judgmental, traveled pointedly over my cream cashmere sweater and jeans. I walked back into the living room, my hands shaking, the cold counter's impressions still on my palms. Garrett and Ashley were sitting too close on the couch, his arm casually draped along the back cushions in a pose that felt staged, rehearsed for an audience of one. They both looked up as I entered, and something in my expression, a raw vulnerability I hadn't meant to show, must have given away my emotional state. "Everything okay?" Garrett asked, his tone laced with a performative concern that suggested he genuinely hoped the answer was yes, and quickly. "Can we talk privately?" He sighed, a dramatic exhalation loaded with irritation, a familiar prelude to his impatience. "Vivian, we have guests." The blood rushed to my ears, a hot wave of indignation. "Your ex-girlfriend is not a guest. She's a problem." Ashley's eyebrows arched delicately, taking a slow, deliberate sip of wine. "Wow. Okay." Garrett stood abruptly, his jaw tight, muscles clenching. "Let's go to the kitchen." We moved into the hallway, just far enough from the living room that our voices wouldn't carry. I hoped. "What is wrong with you?" he hissed, his face inches from mine. "You're being incredibly rude." "I'm being rude?" The words were out before I could censor them, laced with the bitter truth. "Your mother just told me I'm basically replaceable, and you invited your ex-girlfriend to Thanksgiving without even asking me." "I didn't invite her. My mom did. And you allowed it. You knew about this yesterday and said nothing." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen 1,000 times, a tell that revealed his inner turmoil, but it was never truly for my benefit. "Because I knew you'd react exactly like this." "It's embarrassing, Vivian. Ashley is being perfectly pleasant and you're acting like some jealous teenager." "I'm acting like a wife who deserves basic respect." The fury surged, burning away the last vestiges of my composure. Then came the words, sharp and final, a blade severing the last thread of our connection. "If you're going to act insecure, just leave." He wasn't looking at me, his gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder, disengaged, indifferent. "Seriously, if you can't handle being around Ashley for one dinner, maybe you should go." Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not with a dramatic flourish, but quietly and completely, like the final strand of a rope that had been fraying for months. His words, "if you can't handle it, just leave," are a classic example of gaslighting and coercive control. By shifting the blame for his mother's and his own disrespectful actions onto me, he was attempting to distort my reality and make me doubt my own judgment. This is emotionally abusive behavior designed to dismantle a person's sense of self and agency, forcing them to comply out of self-doubt rather than consent. I walked back into the living room, a strange, hollow calm settling over me. I grabbed my purse from the side table, my movements deliberate, almost performative, and headed toward the front door. "Vivian," Raymond called out, finally looking up from his newspaper, a genuine concern etched on his face. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice clear and steady, devoid of the emotion that was churning inside. "Happy Thanksgiving." Sylvia appeared in the doorway, her expression a venomous mix of triumph and false concern. "Oh dear. Running away won't solve anything." I met her gaze, then Ashley's, who was watching with undisguised interest, a smirk playing on her lips. "I'm not running. I'm choosing myself." Garrett followed me to the door, but he didn't try to stop me, a silent admission of his true feelings. "You're being ridiculous." "Maybe," I replied, my voice holding a newfound strength. "But I'd rather be ridiculous than disrespected in my own marriage." I drove home in a daze, the city lights blurring through the rain-streaked windshield. My mind, usually so orderly, raced through 3 years of marriage, cataloging all the small dismissals, the casual cruelties I'd explained away as misunderstandings, the tiny cuts that had finally bled me dry. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a pattern. The house, our house, felt different when I walked through the door alone, quieter, hollow. I stood in the living room, looking at the furniture we'd picked out together, the artwork we'd argued about, the life we'd supposedly built as partners. How much of this was actually mine? I felt a sudden, desperate urge for clarity, for solid ground. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I dialed my sister, Miranda. She answered on the second ring, music and animated conversation loud in the background. "Hey, happy Thanksgiving. How's dinner at the in-laws?" I left. The background noise cut off abruptly. What happened? I told her everything, my voice remarkably steady, every detail laid bare. When I finished, the silence stretched, thick and heavy. "Come stay with us," she finally said, her voice firm, resolute. "Finally. Pack a bag and come here right now." "I can't just leave my house." "Why not?" "He told you to leave, didn't he? So leave. Actually leave." Her words, sharp and clear, planted a seed that grew rapidly into a plan. I walked upstairs to our bedroom, a strange sense of purpose guiding my steps. I started packing, not just clothes for a few days, but everything that mattered to me, everything that made me me. My grandmother's jewelry box, its velvet lining worn smooth with generations of secrets. The quilt my mother had painstakingly stitched, every square a memory. My favorite books, their spines cracked from countless rereadings. The photo albums from before Garrett, snapshots of a life I'd momentarily forgotten. My phone buzzed with a text from Garrett. "You're really going to throw a tantrum over this?" I didn't respond. Instead, I called Miranda back. "Can Quentin come help me move some things?" "He's already getting his truck keys," she replied, a fierce loyalty in her voice. I knew I had found my moment of truth. Over the next 3 hours, while Garrett was presumably still entertaining Ashley and his parents, I systematically removed myself from our shared home. Miranda's husband, Quentin, arrived with his truck and 2 of his brothers, their quiet, steady presence a balm to my frayed nerves. They helped me load the furniture I'd brought into the marriage, the artwork I'd purchased with my own money, the kitchen equipment that had been mine long before the wedding. "You sure about this?" Quentin asked as we maneuvered my grandmother's dresser down the stairs, its polished surface reflecting the faint light from the hall. "Completely." I left Garrett's things untouched. His clothes remained in the closet, his electronics on his desk, his beloved record collection exactly where it had always been. But I took the coffee maker I bought, the dishes from my apartment, the expensive stand mixer that had been a gift from my parents. I also took photographs off the walls, leaving neat rectangular patches of unfaded paint, stark ghosts of a life that was ending. The wedding photos came down. The vacation pictures disappeared. Our smiling faces vanished from every surface. At 9:30 p.m., I walked through the house one final time. It looked hollow, stripped bare, devoid of the warmth that came from my presence. Good. Let him see exactly what his life looked like without me in it. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter with a note, scrawled on the back of a grocery receipt, Since I'm just an option, consider me withdrawn. My attorney will be in touch. Miranda's guest room became my sanctuary. Her daughter Penelope, bright-eyed and curious, helped me unpack, chattering away about her Christmas list, while Miranda made a strong cup of tea and let me cry without offering empty platitudes about how everything would work out. "You deserve so much better than this," Miranda said, sitting on the edge of the bed as I organized my clothes in the closet, the familiar act of small comfort. "I know. I just wish I'd realized it sooner." My phone exploded with messages around 10:45 p.m. Garrett must have finally come home. "Where are you? What did you do to the house? This is insane. We need to talk about this like adults. You can't just take our stuff." I blocked his number. Then I blocked Sylvia's because I could already imagine the lecture she'd want to deliver about proper wifely behavior. The next morning, the air crisp and cold, I called Kenneth Price, an attorney whose name I'd gotten from a colleague who'd gone through a difficult divorce. His receptionist scheduled me for Monday morning, the earliest available. Appointment. Friday passed in a blur of supportive text messages from friends I'd been neglecting and phone calls with my parents, who were shocked but ultimately resolute. My mother, Claudia, immediately offered to help with legal fees if needed. "That woman never deserved you as a daughter-in-law," she said firmly, her voice sharp with indignation. "And her son clearly takes after her." My father, Raymond, was quieter but equally resolute. "Whatever you need, sweetheart. We're here." On Saturday, Garrett showed up at Miranda's house, his car idling awkwardly in the driveway. Quentin answered the door, a solid, unyielding presence, and very calmly explained that I didn't want to see him. "She's my wife." Garrett's voice, raised and indignant, carried through the closed door, echoing with a hollow possessiveness. "Then maybe you should have treated her like one," Quentin replied before shutting the door in his face with a decisive click. Miranda peeked through the curtains as Garrett stood on the porch for several minutes, a solitary figure, apparently weighing his options. Eventually, he returned to his car and drove away. "He looked confused," Miranda reported, turning from the window. "Like he genuinely can't understand why you're upset." "He probably can't," I agreed, a bitter laugh escaping me. In his mind, I'm the one being unreasonable. The truth was, he was trapped in his own narrative. Divorce proceedings often differentiate between marital property and separate property. Marital property is typically anything acquired during the marriage, intended for joint use and subject to division. Separate property usually includes assets brought into the marriage, gifts, or inheritances. My careful distinction between what was ours and what was mine was not just symbolic. It was a legally sound move that would protect my assets and streamline the separation process. This foresight, even amidst emotional turmoil, is crucial in protecting one's financial future. Monday morning arrived with unseasonably warm weather, a gentle, deceptive balm. I dressed carefully for my attorney meeting, choosing a navy suit that made me feel confident, in control, a shield against the swirling chaos of my personal life. Kenneth Price turned out to be a silver-haired man in his 50s with kind eyes and a firm, reassuring handshake. "Tell me everything," he said, pulling out a crisp legal pad. And I did. He listened without interrupting, occasionally making precise, concise notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Oregon is a no-fault divorce state, which works in your favor. We don't need to prove adultery or cruelty, just that the marriage is irretrievably broken. Based on what you've told me and the fact that you kept your finances somewhat separate, this should be relatively straightforward." He looked at me, a question in his eyes. "I want it done quickly. I can file the petition this week. Since you don't have children and you've already physically separated, we can move forward rapidly. The question is, what do you want from this?" I thought about the house, the shared accounts, the life we'd built. "I want what's mine. I don't want his money or his mother's family heirlooms or anything that doesn't belong to me, but I want my dignity acknowledged." Kenneth smiled, a genuine, reassuring smile. "I think we can arrange that." The divorce petition was filed on Wednesday. Garrett was served papers at his office on Thursday. He called from a number I didn't recognize, and foolishly, in a moment of lingering curiosity, I answered. You filed for divorce? His voice was incredulous, laced with a wounded pride that I now found utterly hollow. Over Thanksgiving dinner? Over 3 years of being treated like a placeholder. Thanksgiving was just when I finally saw it clearly. Vivian, this is crazy. We can work this out. Maybe couples therapy. I don't want to work it out. I want to be legally separated from someone who told me to leave rather than defend me to his mother. I didn't mean yes, you did. You meant exactly what you said, and I'm taking you up on it. I hung up before he could respond and immediately blocked the new number. The past was a closed door. Friday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to Miranda's house. I was working remotely from her dining room table, the hum of the laptop a small comfort, when the doorbell rang. Miranda had taken Penelope to soccer practice, leaving me alone in the house, a sudden, vulnerable quiet. Through the window, I could see Sylvia standing on the porch, her expensive coat buttoned against the sharp December cold, her face set in determined lines, like a general preparing for battle. My first instinct was to ignore her, to retreat, but something, a stubborn flicker of newfound courage, made me open the door. We need to talk, she announced, brushing past me into the hallway without so much as a glance of invitation, her presence a cold front invading my space. I don't recall inviting you in. She turned to face me, her eyes as cold and hard as polished stones. You've made quite a mess of things, haven't you? Filing for divorce like some impulsive child. I'm not discussing this with you. Garrett is devastated. Absolutely heartbroken. All because you couldn't handle a simple dinner with old friends. She moved into the living room, her gaze sweeping over Miranda's cheerful family photos with barely concealed disdain. Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? The life we offered you. The life where I'm reminded I'm replaceable? That life. Sylvia waved her hand dismissively, an exasperated flutter. You're being overdramatic. I was simply pointing out that marriages require effort. Ashley understood that. She knew how to make Garrett happy. Then she can have him. The barb landed, swift and true. Oh wait. She already does, doesn't she? Sylvia's carefully composed expression cracked, a ripple of genuine anger flashing in her eyes. They're just spending time together as friends. You're the one who abandoned your marriage. He told me to leave. I simply followed instructions. You know he didn't mean it like that. Men say things in the heat of the moment. A good wife knows when to be gracious, when to smooth things over. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to something almost confidential, chillingly intimate. Let me be frank with you, Vivian. You were never quite right for this family. We tried to accept you. We really did, but you never fit. Too independent, too focused on your little career, too unwilling to prioritize Garrett's needs. Each word was a carefully chosen dart, aimed to wound, to diminish. And a year ago, they might have succeeded. But standing in Miranda's vibrant, lived-in living room, armed with a clarity that came from distance, from a new understanding of my own worth, I felt nothing but pity for this woman who measured worth in submission, in conformity. You're right, I said calmly, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering. I never fit because I'm not meant to shrink myself to accommodate people who don't value me. Value you. We gave you everything. A beautiful home, a position in society, connection to a respected family. I had all of that before Garrett. I have my own career, my own accomplishments, my own family. I didn't need yours. Sylvia's face flushed crimson with anger, a mask of aristocratic composure finally slipping. How dare you speak to me this way? I came here to offer you a chance to fix this situation. To apologize and come back where you belong. I belong exactly where I am, away from you and your toxic family dynamic. You'll regret this when you're alone and struggling. When your little architecture job doesn't fulfill you the way being a wife and mother could have, you'll understand what you've lost. I've already lost 3 years of my life. I won't lose another day. She stared at me for a long moment, perhaps expecting me to crumble under her judgment, to dissolve into tears and apologies. When I didn't, when I simply met her gaze with an unyielding calm, she straightened her coat with an imperious gesture and headed toward the door. Don't come crying to us when this doesn't work out. You've made your choice. She paused in the doorway, delivering her final, calculated shot. Garrett deserves so much better than you. He always has. Then we finally agree on something, I replied, the words a quiet, potent punch. He deserves someone who treats him the way he treated me. And Ashley seems perfect for that role. The door closed behind her with enough force to rattle the frame, a sharp punctuation mark to our exchange. I stood in the sudden silence, my hands shaking with a lingering adrenaline, the aftermath of a battle I hadn't realized I was prepared to win. Miranda arrived home 20 minutes later, Penelope's cheerful chatter preceding them. Was that Sylvia's car I passed? She asked, hanging up Penelope's jacket, her eyes immediately scanning my face. She stopped by to tell me I'm making a huge mistake and that I'll die alone and miserable. Miranda snorted, a laugh bubbling up. Charming woman. What did you say? That I'm done shrinking myself for people who don't appreciate me. Good. She needed to hear it. Miranda joined me at the window, a comforting presence. You know she's going to spread all kinds of stories about you, right? Make you out to be the villain. Let her. The people who matter know the truth. I finally understood what it meant to draw a line in the sand. Over the weekend, a series of emails from Garrett landed in my inbox, each one more desperate than the last. Kenneth had advised me not to respond to any direct communication, to let all contact flow through attorneys, but I read them anyway, morbidly curious about his perspective, his version of reality. The first email was angry. You're destroying everything we built over a minor disagreement. This is insane. The second was pleading. I miss you. The house feels empty without you. Can we please talk about this like adults? The third was manipulative. My mom told me about her visit. I can't believe you were so cruel to her. She was trying to help. The fourth, a rambling missive, arrived Sunday night. I've been thinking about everything and I realize now that maybe I didn't handle Thanksgiving the way I should have. But you have to understand, Ashley is important to my family. We have history. That doesn't just disappear because it makes you uncomfortable. I thought you were more mature than this, more secure in our relationship. If you just come home, we could work through this. I'm willing to go to counseling if that's what you need. Please, Vivian, don't throw away 3 years of marriage. I forwarded all the emails to Kenneth without responding, a small, deliberate act of self-preservation. He called Monday morning. These are actually helpful, he said. They establish a pattern of dismissing your concerns and blaming you for reasonable reactions to unreasonable situations. I'm not trying to weaponize them. I just wanted you to see what I'm dealing with. I understand. But in a divorce, everything is potential evidence. He's essentially admitting that he prioritized his ex-girlfriend's comfort over his wife's feelings. That supports your position. The realization that my marriage had become evidence in a legal proceeding felt surreal, cold. 3 years ago, I'd stood in a garden wearing a white dress, promising forever to someone I thought I knew. How had we arrived here? Work became my refuge. I threw myself into a new project, designing a community center for a nonprofit organization. The challenge of creating functional space within a tight budget while maintaining aesthetic integrity consumed my days and many of my evenings, a welcome distraction from the emotional turmoil. Nathaniel, my boss, noticed my increased dedication. You're doing excellent work, but don't burn yourself out. I need the distraction. Fair enough. Just remember that divorce is a marathon, not a sprint. Pace yourself. His kindness, so unexpected, so gentle, nearly undid me. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried quietly in a stall, overwhelmed by the sheer contrast between his professional respect and the dismissiveness I'd experienced at home. December brought a series of difficult firsts. The first time I saw a couple arguing in a restaurant and felt relieved rather than sad that I wasn't part of that anymore. The first holiday party I attended alone, expertly fielding questions about Garrett with practiced vagueness, a new skill learned in the crucible of separation. The first time someone asked me out, and I realized, with a jolt, that I had no idea how to date as a soon-to-be divorced woman in her 30s. His name was Marcus, a structural engineer I'd collaborated with on a previous project. We ran into each other at a professional conference, and he invited me to dinner. Just dinner, he clarified, reading my hesitation, a sympathetic smile playing on his lips. I heard you're going through some changes. No pressure, just friendly conversation. Dinner turned out to be exactly what I needed. Marcus was easy to talk to, with a self-deprecating sense of humor and a genuine interest in my work. We discussed architecture and engineering challenges, debated the merits of different sustainable building materials, and carefully avoided the topic of my impending divorce, a silent understanding passing between us. This was nice, I said as we stood outside the restaurant afterward, the crisp night air a welcome refreshment. Thank you for not making it weird. My divorce was finalized 2 years ago, Marcus admitted, his voice soft. I remember how isolating it felt. Sometimes you just need to remember that you're still a person outside of the relationship that's ending. Did it get easier? Eventually. Not in a straight line, but yes. You'll get through this. I drove home feeling lighter, grateful for the reminder that there was life after Garrett, that I could still connect with people on my own terms. A quiet hope had begun to bloom. Christmas approached with all its complicated expectations. My parents invited me to spend the holiday with them in Seattle, a familiar comfort, but Miranda insisted I stay in Portland. We're your family, too, she said firmly, her voice leaving no room for argument. You're spending Christmas with us, and Quentin's making his famous prime rib. Christmas morning arrived, cold and clear. I woke in Miranda's guest room to the sound of Penelope's excited squeals as she discovered her presence under the tree. For a moment, a wave of grief washed over me. This was supposed to be my 4th Christmas as Garrett's wife, perhaps planning for children of our own, a future now irrevocably altered. Then I heard Miranda laugh at something Quentin said, heard Penelope beg to open just one more present, and the grief receded, replaced by a quiet sense of belonging. This was family too. This was love without conditions, support without judgment. I joined them in the living room, and Penelope immediately pulled me toward the tree, her small hand warm in mine. Aunt Vivian, look what Santa brought. The day passed in a blur of torn wrapping paper, too much food, and easy conversation. No passive-aggressive comments about my appearance, no comparisons to other women, no feeling like a guest in someone else's performance. That evening, after Penelope had gone to bed, Miranda poured us both generous glasses of wine and joined me on the couch, the quiet comfort of her presence a lifeline. How are you really doing? She asked, her gaze soft but direct. Some days are better than others. Today was good. I'm glad. You deserve good days. She paused, swirling her wine thoughtfully. Has Garrett tried to contact you lately? 3 emails now. Kenneth told me not to respond. Smart. Keep that boundary firm. His mom came by last week. Told me I was throwing away everything they'd offered me. That I'd regret leaving. Miranda's expression darkened, a familiar protectiveness in her eyes. That woman is poison. What did you say? That I'd already lost 3 years. I wasn't losing any more time. Perfect response. Miranda clinked her glass against mine. To reclaiming your time and your life. To new beginnings, I added, and for the first time in a long time, I truly meant it. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed quietly, a period of calm before the storm of New Year resolutions and legal formalities. I spent it organizing my finances, meticulously reviewing the settlement proposal Kenneth had drafted, and planning for the year ahead, a sense of quiet determination guiding my hand. The apartment I'd been viewing became available earlier than expected, a stroke of serendipitous luck, and I signed the lease on December 30th. Moving day was January 3rd. Miranda and Quentin, steadfast as ever, helped me transport the items I'd stored in their garage to my new place. As we carried boxes up the stairs, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't temporary housing or a transition space. This was mine. The apartment was small but filled with light, a promise of new beginnings. Hardwood floors stretched through the living room and bedroom, gleaming under the winter sun, and large windows overlooked a neighborhood park where children played and dogs romped. I could see my life here. Could imagine waking up to this view every morning without the weight of someone else's expectations. It's perfect, Miranda declared, setting down a box of kitchen supplies, her smile wide. Absolutely perfect for you. We spent the afternoon unpacking, hanging curtains that danced in the breeze, arranging furniture in configurations that pleased only me. No compromises about where the couch should go, no debates about whether the artwork was too abstract. Every decision was mine alone. That night, after everyone had left and I was alone in my new space, a profound sense of peace settled over me. I ordered pizza and sat on the floor, eating it straight from the box. The simple pleasure of not having to consider anyone else's dietary preferences or dinner schedule felt revolutionary. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I drove by the house today. It feels empty without you. Can we please talk? I deleted the message without responding and blocked the number. He'd find another way to contact me if he was determined, but I wasn't obligated to make it easy. The next few weeks were administratively intensive but emotionally liberating. I divided our shared accounts, taking only what I had contributed. I changed my emergency contacts, updated my insurance beneficiaries, and began the arduous but satisfying process of reclaiming my maiden name. Each administrative task felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Calling the bank to remove Garrett's name from my personal account, updating my passport information, changing the beneficiary on my retirement fund from him to Miranda. These weren't just practical necessities, they were declarations of independence, small but mighty acts of sovereignty. One afternoon, while sorting through paperwork at my apartment, I found our marriage certificate tucked inside a folder of tax documents. The ornate calligraphy spelling out our names, the official seal, the date we promised forever. I stared at it for several minutes, remembering the hopeful, naive version of myself who'd believed in the fantasy Garrett had presented. She deserved better. I deserved better. I filed the certificate away with the other legal documents Kenneth needed, feeling nothing but relief that this particular chapter was finally closing. The past was fading, making room for a future I now controlled. The community center project I'd been working on reached a critical phase in late January. The nonprofit's board requested a presentation of the final design, and I spent 3 days perfecting every detail, pouring my heart and soul into the drawings. The night before the presentation, I stayed late at the office, refining the renderings, rehearsing my talking points until my voice was hoarse. Nathaniel found me still there at 8 o'clock, surrounded by printouts and color samples, the aroma of coffee heavy in the air. "You're going to nail this tomorrow," he said, leaning against my desk, a comforting presence. "You know that, right?" "I hope so. This project matters." "It does. And you've put together something really special." He paused, studying me with a perceptive gaze that made him an excellent boss. "You've changed since Thanksgiving. Sharper, more confident. It's good to see." The presentation went flawlessly. The board members asked thoughtful questions, praised the innovative use of space, and approved the design unanimously, a wave of genuine enthusiasm in the room. As I packed up my materials afterward, the executive director pulled me aside. "This is exactly what we needed," she said warmly. "You really listened to what our community wanted. Thank you for that." Driving back to the office, I felt a surge of professional pride that had nothing to do with anyone else's validation. This was my work, my vision, my contribution. Garrett had never understood why my career mattered so much to me, had treated it like a hobby I'd eventually outgrow, a quaint pastime. But this was who I was, someone who created spaces where communities could gather and thrive, not just someone's wife. My boss, Nathaniel, picked up on my renewed energy immediately. "Whatever you're going through," he observed after I presented a particularly innovative design for a new client, "it seems to be making you sharper." "Divorce," I said simply, a concise truth. Well, his loss. "This design is brilliant." The compliment felt genuine in a way Garrett's never had. I realized I'd spent 3 years with someone who'd made me feel like I needed to constantly prove my worth when I'd been valuable all along. Ashley tried to friend me on social media in early December. I declined and then made my accounts private, a small but significant act of boundary setting. Miranda reported that mutual acquaintances were gossiping about the divorce, most people shocked at how quickly it had happened. "Let them talk," I said. They don't know what happened behind closed doors. The mediation session in January was tense but productive. Garrett showed up with his own attorney, a sharp-featured woman named Patricia, who immediately tried to claim I'd abandoned the marital home and forfeited my rights to shared property. Kenneth shut that down quickly, his voice calm but authoritative. My client removed only items she brought into the marriage or purchased independently. Your client explicitly told her to leave. We have witnesses. Garrett looked smaller somehow, diminished. He kept trying to make eye contact with me, his gaze pleading, but I focused on the mediator's questions and Kenneth's guidance, refusing to be drawn back into his emotional manipulation. We divided everything cleanly. The house would be sold, and we'd split the proceeds based on our initial down payment contributions. I had contributed 60%, so I received 60%. Bank accounts were divided based on deposits. Retirement accounts were handled according to state law. What about the emotional distress she caused by abandoning me on Thanksgiving? Garrett asked at one point, a plaintive note in his voice. The mediator looked at him over her glasses, her expression unreadable. Oregon is a no-fault state, Mr. Morrison. Emotional distress isn't grounds for additional compensation. The whole process, from filing to final decree, took 3 months. In that time, I moved into my own apartment, a bright 2-bedroom place with hardwood floors and large windows that overlooked a small park, a sanctuary of my own making. I decorated it entirely to my own taste, with none of the compromises I'd made in the house I'd shared with Garrett. Miranda helped me paint the living room a soft sage green that Garrett would have hated. This color is perfect, she said, stepping back to admire our work. It's peaceful. It's mine, I said, and the word felt powerful, a deep thrum of satisfaction. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in early March. I took the afternoon off work and met Miranda for lunch at an Italian restaurant we'd loved since college, a familiar comfort. How do you feel? She asked, raising her glass of wine and a toast. I considered the question seriously, letting the answer form in my mind, a complete, undeniable truth. Free. Lighter. Like I've been carrying something incredibly heavy and finally set it down. To freedom, Miranda said, and we clinked glasses, the crystal chime echoing in the bustling restaurant. I heard through mutual friends that Garrett and Ashley had started dating officially about a month after our divorce was finalized. The news should have hurt, a familiar pang, but instead, it felt validating. I hadn't been paranoid or insecure. My instincts had been correct all along. Sylvia, of course, apparently told everyone who would listen that I destroyed her son's life over a minor misunderstanding. I didn't bother correcting the narrative. People who knew me understood the truth, and people who didn't weren't worth my energy. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Raymond, Garrett's father, at a coffee shop downtown. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot, but approached my table anyway, a hesitant smile on his face. Vivian, how are you? I'm well, thank you. He shifted his weight again, glancing around as if checking whether anyone was watching, a furtive gesture. I wanted to apologize for that Thanksgiving. I should have said something. Yes, you should have. He nodded, accepting the judgment, a rare moment of humility. Garrett's relationship with Ashley isn't going well, from what I understand. Sylvia is already planning their wedding, but they fight constantly. I felt nothing hearing this news. No satisfaction, no regret, just a mild curiosity about people who no longer affected my daily life. I hope he's happier than he was with me. I don't think he is. I think he finally realized what he lost. That's his problem to solve, not mine. Raymond smiled sadly, a flicker of genuine warmth in his eyes. You always were stronger than he deserved. Take care of yourself, Vivian. I intend to. A year after leaving that Thanksgiving dinner, a lifetime away, I received a promotion at work. The new position came with a significant raise and the opportunity to lead my own projects from conception to completion, a dream realized. Nathaniel announced it at a team meeting, praising my innovative designs and strong client relationships, his words a symphony of professional validation. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at an expensive restaurant I'd always wanted to try, a quiet celebration. I sat alone at a table by the window, enjoying a perfectly cooked steak and a glass of excellent wine, watching the city lights reflect off the rain-slicked streets, a vibrant, living canvas. My phone buzzed with a text from Miranda. Heard about your promotion. So proud of you. I smiled, typing back, celebrating solo. Feels right. You've earned it. Love you. The check arrived, and I paid it without wincing at the total, a small, triumphant affirmation of my independence. My finances were stable, my career was thriving, and my apartment was a sanctuary I created entirely for myself. I own my choices and my future. Walking home through the spring rain, feeling the cool droplets on my face, I thought about that woman who'd stood in Sylvia's kitchen a year ago, gripping the counter, her world shattering around her, being told she wasn't the only option. She'd been right to leave. She'd been right to choose herself. I'd spent 3 years trying to fit into a family that didn't value me and a marriage that diminished me. Now, I spent my energy on work I loved, relationships that nourished me, and building a life that felt authentic, that resonated with my truest self. The rain soaked through my jacket, but I didn't rush. I walked slowly, deliberately, savoring the freedom of a Tuesday evening that belonged entirely to me. No obligations to people who didn't respect me. No performances for an audience that would never appreciate the effort. Just me, walking home to an apartment that welcomed me, to a life I built from the ruins of one that never truly fit. My mother called as I was unlocking my door. How was the celebration? Perfect. Exactly what I needed. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. Not just for the promotion, but for everything. For knowing your worth. Thanks, Mom. I learned from the best. After we hung up, I changed into comfortable clothes and made tea, settling onto my couch with a book I'd been meaning to read, the pages crisp and inviting. The apartment was quiet except for the gentle drumming of the rain against the windows and the occasional distant hum of traffic from the street below. This was my life now. Peaceful, autonomous, mine. I thought about sending Garrett a thank you card for telling me to leave that day, for making the decision so clear that even my conflict-averse self couldn't rationalize staying. But he didn't deserve my gratitude or my attention. Instead, I opened my journal and wrote about the promotion, about the goals I had for my new position, about the design project I was conceptualizing that pushed the boundaries of sustainable architecture. The past year had taught me that leaving was sometimes the bravest option, that walking away from disrespect wasn't weakness, but wisdom. I'd lost a marriage, but gained myself back. And that, I realized, as I closed the journal and turned off the lights, was the best trade I'd ever made. When is it truly right to choose your own peace and well-being over fighting for a relationship, even if it means leaving behind everything you thought you had?